Hey, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your friend Christina. So, hot take, were commercials better or at least more tolerable when they had jingles, slogans, or they just were kind of like a series, kind of like the Jake from State Farm series going on there, or even the Geico commercials with the little lizard? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll let you know my thoughts at the end of this episode. So, thanks for stopping by. Whether you're a new listener or a friend of the show, I just wanted to say welcome. So, we have some new and exciting things coming your way very soon. I've been talking about having new guests, having new segments, and both things are true. And you are not going to want to miss a thing. So make sure that you are pressing that subscribe button. Make sure you're pressing that follow button so you can subscribe to us at Let's Unravel Pod on YouTube. And you can follow us along on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget our hot takes. There's a poll on Spotify. So if you're a Spotify user, make sure you're pressing that show notes button, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, and you're casting your vote on were commercials more tolerable when they had a jingle, slogan, or they were a series. Let us know your thoughts. And now you're not going to want to miss any news or short clips of the show, so make sure you're following us at Let's Unravel Pod on Instagram and TikTok so you don't miss a thing. So without any further ado, let's move into our favorite topic here at Let's Unravel, win of the week. So the win this week is to all of the listeners here at Let's Unravel. I want to say a big thank you to any of you that are listening, whether you have been listening since day one or whether this is the first time that you're listening. I just want to say thank you. There's so many other podcasts out in just the world. And the fact that you chose to listen to Let's Unravel and to listen to me, Christina, talk, I greatly appreciate it, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of your support, and I really hope you enjoy this show. I'm quite excited about the topic this week. So the win of the week this week, it's all about you. Baby, I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself there. Anyways, so let's move into our topic of the week. What are we unraveling today? So let's unravel capturing the heart. Now, as I was writing this episode, it never once occurred to me that this title could sound like a title of a dating episode. So I am sorry, this is not about dating. This is actually about something entirely different. The reason why I titled this episode Capturing the Heart is because we're going to talk all about the power of storytelling and how storytelling can actually capture people's heart. So for as long as I can remember, I have loved storytelling. Storytelling has been my absolute favorite thing. I've expressed it multiple times here on the podcast, and usually the way I express it is through movies and TV shows, sometimes books, sometimes music. And this time, I just want to talk about the power of storytelling and actually the storytelling from people in general. Not through the means of Hollywood, not through the means of publishing companies, but actually the power of connection and that ability to capture or captivate someone just from sharing stories with them or sharing the story of your life with someone. It's something that I find to be irreplaceable. It's moments in my life where I've found them to be pillars, things that are unforgettable in nature. So in my early 20s, one of the things I used to do is I would go to my grandma's house and I would go and I'd help her clean. And it's funny because, at first glance, I'm thinking, I'm just going to clean. I'm just going to help my grandma out. I'm not really thinking anything of it. And what was happening over time is I was actually having these conversations with my grandma, which, you're like, well, you're at her house. Of course you're having conversations. And I'm like, I know. Anyways. But what was actually happening is she wasn't just telling me stories like, oh, this is how my day was, oh, this, that, or whatever. Actually, what was happening is as we were cleaning, as we were picking things up, it was like behind every item, there was a story. And within some of those stories, I got to hear about her childhood. I got to hear about her whole life that happened prior to her having kids, prior to her having grandkids. And it was really this beautiful moment of where I got to know my grandma on this very human and very personal level where I got to actually know the woman. And I wasn't just knowing this figure or just knowing this relative. It was getting to know the woman behind who my grandma is. And that is something that I think about those years that I would go over and I would clean. And they are the most irreplaceable moments of my life because it's the power of storytelling. Getting to see someone in a very raw state, get to open up and to share, whether good, whether bad, doesn't matter. But what's happening is there's this moment, there's this exchange, just like when you would go to buy something and you exchange money for whatever the item is that you're buying. The same thing happens with storytelling. When someone trusts you, or sometimes people just need someone to listen, and to sit there and to actually listen and absorb what someone is saying, it's amazing because it's captivating. And you know what storytelling does is it creates empathy and understanding, because for a moment, you actually get to stop and see how this person operates. I think this is a universal experience where isn't it so easy to draw up our own conclusions where we're just like, well, let's say you see one of your friends and they look kind of mad that day, and all of a sudden you start to create this whole story in your head like they must hate me or this happened or X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden you find out it's like they were nervous or they had a bad day at home or whatever it was. And before you ever got to see them, this whole event, this whole situation occurred. And then all of a sudden you're face to face with them. But it's not unless they open up to you and tell you, yeah, I had a hard day at home before I got to school, or yeah, I had a really crappy day before I got to work. And then all of a sudden you start to realize there's more than what meets the eye. And that is the beauty of capturing someone's heart, is through stories. And whether we want to believe it or not, our entire world operates around stories. I mean, news. What is the news? It's stories. It's the stories of what are happening in the streets in different countries. I mean, Hollywood, it's stories. Everything is about stories. And there is nothing more liberating than the moment that you decide that you're going to step out of your comfort zone and you're going to share your story. Because at some point in time, we all share parts of ourselves with the people around us. So whether that is sharing a really vulnerable piece of you with your best friend, or whether it's something that most people would deem as being insignificant, but to you held significant value, that's the power, that's the liberation you feel. And there's something really incredible about thinking that you're never going to share your story when you see documentaries about people that have been through horrific things. And one common thing a lot of these people always say is, I thought I was going to carry this with me to the grave. And what's so interesting is somewhere along the way, they found the strength, they found the courage to step up and to step forward and to share their story. And what's amazing about sharing stories is it creates this liberty. It creates this act. It creates this moment of connection where people that once felt lost are actually able to come together. And for all you know, it can create this stirring. It can create this spark of getting other people to step forward and to speak, well, their truth. And a lot of people might cringe at that phrase of your truth, but everyone has a story. And yeah, it's your truth. It's your side of what happens. But don't forget, there's always two sides to a story. So what's very true for you is also very different for someone else. I had heard some researcher talk about the development of children. So you're in a home, say you have two parents, and say there's three kids. They say all three kids have a vastly different experience from one another. So what the oldest experienced, what the middle experienced, what the youngest experienced. And once again, so to ask the oldest child what their story was, what their reenactment of the dynamic between them and their parents, and then to ask the middle and the youngest, it can look so different. It doesn't mean that the oldest story isn't credible. It doesn't mean that the youngest's isn't true. It just means everybody has a different experience. And that is, again, what makes storytelling so universal. Like, especially when you're watching the movies where they cut from all these different angles. Like, you think about those movies like New Year's Day, where all of a sudden you have all these characters and they all end up being intertwined or connected somehow, and they're all experiencing something a little bit different. So what really inspired the episode this week was, now maybe you've heard of this Instagram account and maybe you haven't, but Humans of New York. So Humans of New York has become so much more than just a little Instagram account. Humans of New York has become really this beautiful, in my opinion, it's become a beautiful tribute to New York. So this photographer, Brandon Stanton, I do apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. I am not great with pronouncing people's names, even my own relatives' names. I'm sorry. But Brandon, so he is the photographer. He is really the creator, founder. He was the person that came up with this idea of Humans of New York. What is so beautiful about the Humans of New York is a lot of people know it as, okay, so this photographer, he would go around and he would just take pictures of everyday people in New York City. And sometimes he would ask them about their life stories. Sometimes he would ask them what their greatest fears were. And he would just kind of ask these different questions. And then he would do a little write-up on them, and he started posting them online. And it slowly started to gain traction. And I remember when he had started to really hit his peak of popularity with Humans in New York. And it was around when I was in high school, and everyone talked about Humans of New York. And you really kept track of it, and you read the stories. And I remember there was one series he did a couple years ago, and it was about all these women that were incarcerated. And it was amazing to see the photos of these women. And there's something so beautiful about the way he would capture these individuals and then the way he captured these women. And you got to really see this authenticity behind it. And then what was happening is as he would talk to him, you got to hear their life story. And once again, you can't help but be moved by it because they're still a person. So what Brandon has done with Humans of New York is he's had all different kinds of series. Like I said, he did ones about women being incarcerated. He's gone to other countries and other cities and done photos there. But what he's done is he's taken over Grand Central Station. Now, for any of you that have ever been in Grand Central Station, it's huge. And it's also really cool because it's been featured in movies and TV shows. You know, I think about the show Gossip Girl. In the pilot episode, you see parts of Grand Central Station. And so by taking over Grand Central Station, what he's done is he said no ads, just art. He's taken photos of people from New York and their stories, and instead of having ads on these digital walls or printed or however they're laid out in Grand Central, because he's done it in a variety of different ways, he has put just people's faces and their stories, and he's put it all over Grand Central. And so I had first seen this story in a TikTok video, of course, because TikTok is how I receive my news. And then what's also been cool is the New York Post has a whole article on what Brandon has done in Grand Central Station. And so I will link that article in the show notes down below. But here were just some of the quick bullet points from that article. Is the photographer Brandon has turned the transit hub into Dear New York. So that is what this whole project has been called. So what he's done with Dear New York is for 2 weeks, he's taken over Grand Central Station. And so this project was running through October 9th. So by the time this episode comes out, this project will have been done. But for 2 weeks, he replaced all of the 112-year-old terminal's commercial signage with portraits of fellow New Yorkers and their personal stories, and projected 50-foot high images of his subjects onto the station marble's walls. Now, you have to see photos of this. It is incredible. Like I said, if you've ever been in Grand Central Station, there's ads absolutely everywhere. So the fact he's gone in and replaced it all with photos of people and their stories, this is incredible. The article even says it was quite ambitious. This is a quote from Brandon. He said, "This was an attempt to recreate the city and its peoples in a single building." And I love that because you get to see the heart behind Brandon and how he just really loves to observe and see really these humans of New York. And he's quoted again saying, "This is what I'm trying to celebrate." And so Brandon, he's only 41 and he's the man behind this phenomenon called Humans of New York. And you can follow his Instagram account. It's at Humans of New York. So a little background on Brandon. In 2010, he lost his job as a bond trader in Chicago, and he moved to New York to begin an inherently simple documentary project. He would take photos of locals, interview them, then share their pictures and stories with the world. And this is where Brandon had said, "When I first came to New York City, my impression was that the entire world was here. All these beliefs and ethnicities and cultures and viewpoints crammed onto the same sidewalks, the same subways," he said. And now, 15 years later, he's captured more than 10,000 people. Think about that, 10,000 people across 5 boroughs, everyone from go-go dancers to crossing guards and homeless fathers. All along the way, he's racked up more than 12 million Instagram followers and published 4 best-selling books. This is just absolutely incredible. Even now, the most recent project he's done, Dear New York, was released earlier this month and serves as a record of sorts for a massive exhibition, which has included over 150 digital screens across the terminal and the subway station beneath. This alone is the largest use of physical space for a single installation in the history of the New York subway system. And that's what Brandon had said. This is something where we need to acknowledge this. This is something where in the world, there's so many horrific things that happen. We have no problem highlighting all the bad things that are going on. But in this moment, this is something so incredibly beautiful that Brandon has done is he is focusing on people. Because at the end of the day, if we're honest with ourselves, it's people that matter. So whether you have a horrible relationship with your family, but maybe you have a chosen family, maybe you have friends that are like family, maybe you have a good family. The point is there's people around you that you greatly care about. And to stumble upon someone like Brandon who's going around New York and he's taking such care and consideration of people that he wants to capture their photo and capture their story, this is beautiful. It's timeless. This will be something that will be passed down for generations to come. And that's the beauty of what this is. That's the beauty of art. And that is something that you can't replace. So even in this massive accomplishment that Brandon has done, he has solidified this moment in time. And even the fact he has gotten to really make history. This is great. This is modern day art. And so with this idea of storytelling and the impact of it is if we are honest with ourselves, some of the biggest brands in the world value telling stories. You know, one brand in particular that does it really well is Nike. And so the story component that Nike does through their ads is they focus on these athletes, and it's these athletes that have gone the distance. They're telling this hero's journey, and it's creating this inspiration. It's sparking these ideas and possibility in a younger generation. That is what these commercials are doing. And then there's some part within all of us that we do love to see a hero's journey. Just as a whole, we just love to see people's origin stories. I mean, you think about the movies like Marvel and how you'll see the origin stories of all the like Captain America, the Iron Man. And then when you get to superheroes like Batman and you see his origins. But then what is so unique is you get to like the Joker and then you see his origins. And once again, there's something unique about storytelling and seeing the perspective of how does someone get to be where they are, good, bad, ugly, whatever the case is, somewhere in our DNA, we want to know the story. We want to understand what is going on. And a lot of times stories provide us with this greater understanding because once again, it creates empathy within us. And so with Nike, with their slogans of just do it, and with these commercials of showing these athletes that have accomplished these incredible things, you know, I think about like Olympians, and a lot of times Nike will do a whole special ad with just the Olympians, and how Nike will do special ads with some of the more popular women athletes to see this expression, to see this commonality of they're all athletes. They all have done something hard to be where they are. And this is where Nike comes in and they do that whole storytelling. They're showing us, and it's not just telling us. And that is something that Nike has done and has valued, and they have known this is what works. Just like they know their slogan, just do it, it works. Because sometimes you don't need a lot of words to capture someone's heart. You just need something authentic. You know, you think of just do it. It's not complicated. Just do it. And then you look at companies like GoPro. Now, once again, GoPro is one of those companies where I felt like I used to hear a lot about it when it first came out. But GoPro has become very relevant because it focuses on user-generated content. And what they do is they focus on how the users are actually using their product. So instead of making commercials where it's like, this is what we think people are going to want to see, they actually use the content other people have generated. And that is something that you don't really see other brands doing too well. And so what they're doing is they're telling stories through the means in which these different maybe content creators or these different users are using. And what's really cool with GoPro is it doesn't have to be a content creator that's using GoPro. It's focused on everyday people. And even one of my favorite things when I was doing some research for this episode and looking at the GoPro YouTube channel, they have some really cool videos up. They have them from content creators. One girl that had a big cooking series on TikTok, she did a whole like content creation video on how she films her videos and using a GoPro. Then you got to see the perspective of a Michelin star chef. Now it was 24 minutes long, but it was really cool because if you've ever wondered, okay, what does it take to work in a Michelin star restaurant? He actually had a GoPro strapped to him, and you saw him go through his day, how he would cook things, how he would hand them to the other staff members. And then there's just so many other videos there too. But once again, these are brands that have focused on the value of storytelling. They have focused on everyday people because it's the everyday person that can really make the greatest impact. Now that we've talked about Humans of New York and how Humans of New York was just a whole project of focusing on everyday people in their stories, and we've talked about brands and how they they value stories. And now when we get into movies and documentaries, if we look at certain musicians, I think about Taylor Swift and how she just released a whole new docuseries that's coming out in December, and it's going to be all about the Eras Tour and the end of an era and about what her life was behind the scenes. That's a documentary. She's sharing her story and it's pulling people in. It's giving people a greater understanding of what her life was during that time. Then we look at celebrities like Justin Bieber. So many people knew who Justin Bieber was from YouTube or just a few of the tours he did. But when he released his documentary, Never Say Never, it catapulted him into a whole new level of fame. And once again, it was the power of telling stories. It was the power of captivating an audience. And one of the things I think about with musicians is, why would they need to do documentaries? Why would they need to pull us into their stories? I mean, with Taylor Swift, she writes so much. I mean, you could easily feel a connection just through her songwriting. And you think, okay, well, music should be enough. By doing documentaries, it actually creates this space where you start to look at it and it feels like there's more intentionality behind it. You tend to focus on heavier topics and there's more of a deep dive. You're really trying to cut through the crap. Sometimes these documentaries are fluff pieces and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're more authentic than others. Think about Justin Bieber. He's done several documentaries after Never Say Never. And so when we focus on the idea, is they're creating a space where it allows more vulnerability. Not all musicians that do a documentary, they're going to show their most vulnerable side. But what it does is it at least creates a space where if they want to show up in that way, they can, and it makes it a little bit easier. And then you have these moments where you get to actually connect with your audience in a whole different way because you're showing up in a way maybe that you're not necessarily confident in. You look at some of these musicians and some of them are like, I'm so confident with the guitar and singing on stage, but as soon as I strip that away, I'm so uncomfortable. And that's what's so beautiful about having these moments where you can be intentional and you can show up in an honest and vulnerable way. What happens is there tends to feel like this sense of responsibility from the audience perspective because you feel this sense of, okay, how do I get involved? There may be a sense of urgency. And maybe that's not the feeling of majority, but I know anytime I've ever watched a documentary, you do feel this sense of responsibility because you've just gotten to see someone bare their heart. I remember even when Justin Bieber had released a documentary and he had talked about how he had created the song Lonely. And it was one of those moments where you were listening to him talk about it and you're just like, oh my God, I wish there was something I could do. Because once again, that is such a human reaction where it's like when you're hearing someone pour out their heart about something and you're just like, yeah, I wish there was something I could do. Because once again, if your friend sat down with you and they talked to you, you'd be like, oh man, I'm here. What do you need? Let's do whatever we have to do. And we have those moments where we're so bought in and we're so on that side. But then there's this other idea that I want to think about. So we've talked about the pros of storytelling. We've talked about the beauty of it. And even how when people open up, there's such a warmth and validation to it. But what is also on the other side of it, when we start to hear people's stories, like a perfect example is Justin Bieber, we start to idolize them. We start to put them on these pedestals that they were never meant to be on. And sometimes they don't even want to be on them themselves. And that is something that also happens because we become so a part of their story that it's like you think you know them, but you only know a fraction of their story. So in this moment, we want to be so aware of the empathy and the understanding, but also not forget that people evolve and they change. So what might have been this moment in time, this chapter or this footnote, it doesn't mean it's this ongoing narrative in someone's life. And for other people, maybe it is, but that's not always the case. And even this idea of putting people on pedestals, that is a whole nother story in itself. And it's so interesting because a different episode, I had talked about how I loved Paramore and Hayley Williams is the lead singer of Paramore. And there's one particular song that Paramore put out and it was called Idol Worship. And I loved these lines in the song, the first verse or two. And it goes like this: standing here like I'm supposed to say something. Don't hold your breath. I never said I'd save you, honey. And I don't want your money. If I was you, I'd run from me or rip me open. You'll see you're not the only one who's hopeless. Be sure to put your faith in something more. I'm just a girl and you're not as alone as you feel. We all got problems, don't we? We all need heroes, don't we? But rest assured, there's not a single person here who's worthy. Now, I have to say, I love that song. I think it's a beautiful representation where you can look at this other side of storytelling, whether it's a good story, whether it's a bad story, but even this moment of where you see this person, they were put on this pedestal and all of a sudden they're like, I don't even know how I got here. And I don't even recommend that you put me here. And I highly recommend that you go to listen to that song. But it's such a beautiful representation of life because just like we love stories, we also create stories. We create narratives for others as well. Whether we've heard their story, whether we haven't, whether we've put someone in a place that they never should have been, it goes back to the same idea. As much as maybe you don't love to hear people's life stories, some part of us craves having that connection. We want to know, we want to understand. Bringing in a new idea, and it's not even so much an idea, but it's really this Japanese art form. We think about our flaws. Why do people not share their stories? A lot of times you have to share your flaws. You have to share the messiness of your life. Yet in that mess, we have an opportunity to turn it to something beautiful. And that's where I think about this Japanese art form. And I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I am so sorry. I think it's pronounced kintsugi, and it's you repair broken pottery with a lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver. And the philosophy behind kintsugi is to celebrate the damage and the imperfections as part of the object's history rather than hiding them. The repaired object is seen as more beautiful and valuable for its breakage and repair. And I remember when I had first heard about this Japanese art form, and it was so cool to think about how they valued the brokenness and how they valued it so much that they would get a powdered gold or silver and make it into this bonding agent that's a lacquer, and they would find a way to mend back these broken pieces so they could turn this pot whole again. There was something so beautiful about that. And then to see that they valued it because of its brokenness. And if you've ever seen any photos of those potteries, they're beautiful. They really are. It's not like something like, oh no, a first grader broke their art project and you're like, oh dear God, it looks horrible. It's like, no, these pieces of pottery are really cool. And so now all of this leads me to this one particular moment in my life where I would say one sweatshirt changed my entire perspective on self-worth. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm wearing a sweatshirt and there's some words on my sweatshirt. And if you're listening, I'm going to tell you what the words say, but I'm going to lean to the side for one split second. And so my sweatshirt says, so worth loving. So the story behind the sweatshirt, I was about 19 years old and my family had taken a trip to Atlanta. And so we were going for a woodworking convention because my dad owned his own business and he did woodworking. So we had gone to Atlanta, and one of the nights we were there, we had gone to this kind of like a mall, but it was a renovated old factory turned into kind of like a mall. So they had a bunch of really cool one-off shops. And I remember walking into the store, and a lot of the pieces in there, they were from local businesses. It was really cool to see these local pieces. And I remember stopping at this one section, and it was the so worth loving section. There wasn't a lot of pieces. There was a sweatshirt and there was like a t-shirt. And I remember picking up this blue sweatshirt, and I remember seeing the words, so worth loving. And I was immediately hooked. And when something like that happens, the only way I can express it is it felt like there was something that was unlocking in me. So it didn't really make any sense. After I bought the sweatshirt, I had started to look into what this company was. Because how do you have a name of a company called So Worth Loving? Because there's weight behind that. There's intentionality behind that. What does that mean? And so I remember looking it up. I remember seeing the founder. Her name was Erin Eady, and she had created So Worth Loving. She even wrote a book called So Worth Loving, and you can find it on Amazon. And it was so beautiful because when I had stumbled upon the website and I was looking into it, it wasn't just a clothing company. It was this community. It was this valuing. The website has since changed, but I remember when I had seen it, and it was this intentionality of saying your story matters, who you are, and no matter what has happened, you are so worth loving. As someone who is 19 and moved into their early 20s, I struggled with a lot of anxiety and depression, and along with other things as well. And I just remember in that moment, it was this lifeline. It was as if someone had thrown this hand out to me that it's like, if I wanted to take it, I could. And honestly, I always kind of joke to myself, I'm like, who knew a sweatshirt could save your life? But it's true, because you have these moments in time where you question things and you want to know there's something more out there. You want to know things have meaning. And so sometimes you walk into a store that you never intentionally meant to go into, and you find a sweatshirt and it says something simple, but it's the most profound thing you could have ever imagined because it was so worth loving. And I just remember, like I said, I picked up that sweatshirt and it unlocked something entirely in me. And from that moment forward, it made me a cheerleader for this community, this company. Because even years later, up to last year, I was buying a shirt off the website. When you can find people that stand for something and they value something and they back something so incredibly beautiful like that, why wouldn't you want to support it? And most importantly, when you let someone's story in, you let it into your heart and you allow it to, captivate or capture it, you can find a piece of your story coming out. And that's ultimately what happened to me is I took this sweatshirt that she made and even the origins of how she started the company, the way that Erin Eady started So Worth Loving is she couldn't afford to sell shirts. So she would just tell people to send her old t-shirts and she would spray So Worth Loving onto the t-shirts. And then eventually she was able to make her own sweatshirts and then start selling them. But I'm sure she wasn't ever expecting that a 19-year-old girl was going to go into a random shop in Atlanta and buy a sweatshirt that said So Worth Loving. And ultimately, that sweatshirt changed my perspective on everything. It made me realize how important sharing your story is because she has a story. And that is why she started So Worth Loving, because she had her own hangups and insecurities and hurts, just like we all do. Whether big or small or whatever they are, they're yours. This is the beauty of if you can share your story or if you can let someone else's stories in, it'll be amazing how somehow you can find a piece of your story coming out too. So I'm wearing the sweatshirt she designed while I'm telling you my story. And that is the beauty of storytelling. And that is the thing that has always captured my heart the most. And if there's one thing I'd love for you to hold on to, it would be this. All it takes is one moment, one story, and one life. And that could be you. That's all it takes. And in my life, I've noticed all it took was one moment, one story, and one person. And it changes everything. It changes history. And some of the greatest people in history, all it took was one moment, one story, and one person. And so don't ever undervalue the impact that you can make because all it takes is one. So I'd love to move into my favorite part of this whole episode. And that's trying to summarize this whole episode up into a singular phrase, episode in a phrase. So our episode in a phrase this week is stories spark a movement. All right. So without any further ado, let's move into sticky thoughts, thoughts that stick. 1. Stories capture emotional connections and create a long-term effect. 2. Even in a mess, beauty can be on the other side. 3. Stories spark a movement. And last but certainly not least, 4. One moment, one story, one life. So thanks for hanging out with me today and thanks for talking with me all about storytelling and capturing the heart. This is one of my absolute favorite topics. So I'd love to connect with you more and you can connect with us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. If you enjoyed this week's episode or the podcast show in general, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Your reviews and comments go a very long way. Also, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and hit that follow button on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Stay up to date on all new episodes. We have new episodes coming out every single Thursday, and you are not going to want to miss a thing. Well, I guess it's that time of the episode to tell you my hot take. I would say commercials were so much better when we had jingles or slogans or series. Nowadays, I feel like all the commercials are all about medications, and things were so much better when we had little like slogans like Subway Eat Fresh or Tricks are for kids. It was more fun. Let's just say. And you know what? Maybe this is a hot take. Disney Channel is doing it right by having their own curated special commercials. It was almost like you kind of didn't mind when Disney Channel commercials came on because at least they were like kid centered. Whereas now, whenever you watch something, whether it's like on Hulu or whatever, no one wants to watch ads. I mean, let's just put it this way. They're just boring. Let's make it a little bit more entertaining. I do love a good Jake from State Farm's ad, though. I will say that. So that is my hot take. Commercials were better when we had series or jingles or slogans. I don't want to see any more medication commercials. So let me know your hot take in the comments down below. And I will see you guys next week with another new episode. That's all. Bye.